How are you doing? Is my English okay? I'll try to speak slowly. Throw things at me if I go off the rails too much. I first wrote test automation in 1994. He's old. I used, the company I worked at made music software, and we had a subscription to MSDN, and it came with the alpha version of something Microsoft was making called MS Test, which eventually became Visual Test. And I wrote UI tests for this music software. In 1995, I started at Microsoft testing networking, and I wrote some more visual tests, but nobody was really using that product at Microsoft. So I faded away, wrote a lot of automation in C and C++, a lot of really awesome batch files. I wrote test frameworks. I wrote test harnesses. I wrote test tools, both that we used internally and that we gave to customers. I wrote all kinds of test junk, and I made a lot of stupid mistakes. I did a lot of dumb shit. So what I'm going to do in the next hour is sort of barf on you, brain dump on you a lot of the dumb things I've done. We'll talk about some of the things that I think are important in test automation, and hopefully have a little fun along the way. I prefer a little more interaction, but I can't get microphones to you to ask questions, but feel free to yell things out. Okay. Very good learner. All right. So what is testing, and why do we test? Now's a good time to yell something out. We test to make money. I'm reminded of the Dilbert cartoon where you know the one I'm thinking about, when the boss tells them that we're going to get paid for every bug they fix, and then Wally says, Dilbert says, "Where are you going?" And Wally says, "I'm going to go code myself a new minivan." So no, we don't. I hope we don't test just for the money, but we test. Simon had a pretty good definition this morning. Yeah. Test to gain confidence in the product, learn how it works. I think testing is a knowledge acquisition activity. We test to learn about the software. We learn some good things, we learn some bad things. And what's important is that I think all testing is a knowledge acquisition activity. How many of you, I'll do raise of hands here. Easy one first. How many of you are testers? And the ones that aren't, you'd probably do some testing also. How many of you write test automation regularly? Most of you, good. All right, I'll piss some of you off today. For those of you that don't, how many of you have, actually here's a good question. Do you guys have separate teams, any of you that do you have a test analyst that writes the test cases, then the automation team that writes the tests? Any of you people? I'm definitely going to make you mad today. It's okay, right? Wait. I didn't come all this way to make friends. Come on. The important thing with automation is that I've seen teams, maybe I should point out the mistakes when I get them, but I see teams focus on automation as this thing, and I'll say it because I did it myself. I'm thinking back to when I first learned how to use automation tools, and I just wanted to automate everything with these automation tools. And I wrote a bunch of really dumb tests. I wrote tests to try every single input I could every single integer input into some input field. Yeah, everyone from, I didn't know anything about boundaries or equivalence classes. I just brute force sent a bunch of automation, a bunch of inputs to some data to some inputs. It was dumb, but I was automating. I was living the life, living the dream. The goal is testing. Actually, no. The goal is quality. We use testing to get there, and we use test automation when it helps us get there more efficiently. Right? Nobody yelled out anything bad. We're going to go with that. Simon, how many of you are in Simon's talk this morning? Because you couldn't get enough English today? So in watching Simon's talk, He's taking a picture of Simon, taking a picture of Simon. I realized that in our philosophy of automation. So just in case it's not clear, that's Simon, that's me. I'm the one with a different accent. Okay. If you're with automation, the robots are taking over. How many think that your job is going to go away because of automation? Yes, it's not. You're fine. It's cool. I was listening to the radio maybe 5-10 years ago at home, driving to work, and Amazon had just come out with an announcement they're going to replace some of their stock selection people with actual robots. And people were calling the station, like freaking out and complaining, like, we can't have robots taking over our jobs. People need those jobs to make money. And I realized, oh my God, it's the same conversation I've been hearing about test automation. And it just hurts my head. What that does is the automation frees up people to do some more interesting, some more creative, some more mind-engrossing work. How many of you love to get up and go to work and do mind-numbingly boring work all day? You didn't understand what I said, did you? I think there's plenty of I call knowledge work. Familiar with the writing of Dan Pink, he talks a lot about it, but the term's been around since Deming or before. We think while we work. We adapt while we work. We use context to drive what we do. So next time you think the robots are taking over, you can't go a day without finding some article about the self-driving car failure, about some other failure. And even if you have automation or robots, you need to debug those things. And we'll talk a little more about that in a few minutes. Okay, we're warmed up now. Is anybody pissed off yet? Good, because now comes the fun stuff. You guys seen this before? The UI automation pyramid? Like in every slide all day? Mike Cohn invented this, 10 years ago or more. Have any of you read the article that Mike Cohn wrote to go with this picture? This is why the robots won't take over. He says, for this UI level, that you should write as few of these as possible. How many of you, when you approach your full automation stack of unit, service integration, whatever you're going to call the middle layer, and UI tests, write as few UI tests as possible? You're my friends. In the camp I haven't angered yet. So there's a little bit of an overemphasis, I think, on UI automation. I was a little afraid. I went to Simon's looking for, I don't want to make him mad because I might disagree with him, but he actually said something similar to this as well. So I feel like I'm okay. I'm a little vindicated. So why don't we write tests at that layer? Why shouldn't we write all of our tests at that layer? Because they're big, they take a long time to run, they tend to be more flaky. We'll talk more about flaky in a little bit, and they can be more difficult to debug. Can you go without them entirely? Probably not, but you got to be careful with those. So what we see is the testing ice cream cone, which I've seen before. I've been a part of this before. I look at this and I reflect back on my long history at Microsoft doing all kinds of things, and you know what I see when I look at the ice cream cone? I'm going to embarrass myself 3,000 miles from home, 5,000 miles from home. Windows Millennium. I was so happy when Vista came out, so it wasn't the most embarrassing product from Microsoft. But this was how we did Windows Millennium. This is an operating system, and the way it worked, tangent, which I called Marketing Edition because I was working happily testing video capture drivers on Windows NT, having a great time, learning all kinds of stuff. And marketing said, hey, we need a new version of Windows before Windows 2000 comes out. And they put together a team, and there were, 75 developers, about 20 testers, and an army full of people in the lab testing stuff manually all day on an operating system. And yep, that's about right. That's what we had. I think the unit test may have been even smaller. Actually, I don't think it was. It was like super tiny small. And you know how that turned out. If you don't like ice cream, there's also another flavor called the cupcake. Choose which one you don't want to do, but avoid them both. Those are anti-patterns. Noah Sussman, maybe 6 months ago by now. Anybody know Noah? Heard of Noah? Follow him on Twitter. Noah inverted the test pyramid the good way. The unit tests are still the most, but he looks at the pyramid as a bug filter, a way to understand, like, of all the bugs that can happen, only the bugs that can't find unit tests, only the non-logic bugs, these bigger bugs, get through to the integration test, the bugs that only happen when components talk to each other. Then the integration test should catch all those. And then the end-to-end test catch all the bugs that can only get that far. And then at the very bottom, they reach there, and we try and catch them through monitoring and production. Another point that Simon made that I want to reiterate, I'm sorry you're hearing some of the same talk twice, is that when you find a bug down here in the bottom of the pyramid, write the unit test, write the lowest level test that can catch that bug. Because it's important. When you find bugs that make it all the way to the bottom of this inverted pyramid, write the test at the very lowest level, higher part of the pyramid, that will catch that bug. That's how you build or you invert your cupcake into something that looks like a pyramid and is manageable. Okay, test design. What's that? You're laughing because you don't know. Somebody will say, it's designing tests. I'll say, you're right. So I asked this question earlier, but one extra question. I already asked the first two. How many of you are test designers? Oh, come on. Test design sounds hard. So what is test design? It's really, to put the most easy, it's figuring out what you want to test and how you're going to test it. Are any of you any good at it? The next part of my talk is going to really suck because we're going to design some tests. Just a couple. Dozen. I think that test design is inseparable. There is no automated test design and manual test design or exploratory test design. There is test design, period. Full stop. You can't, and this is why I asked the question earlier, the notion of having one team to write test cases, then another team to automate those, just drives me nuts. There were, I don't know any Russian swear words, and the English ones are about to come out, so I'm just going to stop and pause for a moment. But it really bugs me, because I think that you have to think about how to test whatever it is you're testing holistically, and out of that comes ideas for automation and ideas for things that maybe don't need to be automated. Things need to be done in other ways. Just said that. Okay, here is one of my Alanisms. I have a couple of them, not a lot. You should automate 100% of the tests that should be automated. Make sense? That's what you do. And I will tell you, I have more stories. I have seen more mistakes in myself. I'll just talk about me. I won't pick on anyone else breaking this rule. One of the ways you'll learn what rules work is by really messing up. So think of an example, maybe in your head before I tell you mine, of this is stupid, Alan. What does it mean? How could I automate tests that shouldn't be automated? Let me tell you how. I had a conversation once, late night. It was from like 2 hours, from maybe 8 to 10 p.m. One night in the spring of 1997. I was testing graphics on Windows 98, and I had a long discussion, and there's an API called getPixel, which gets the color of a pixel at a screen coordinate. There's an API called setPixel that sets the color of a pixel at a screen coordinate. Can you use getPixel to test setPixel? Oh shit, I don't know. Well, I can, but then the paranoid tester goes, well, what if one's lying? And that was me. I was the paranoid tester, wasn't thinking through this. And I thought, you know what I'm going to do? There's only half a dozen really at the time. Now there's 2, but half a dozen graphics card companies. I'm going to go query the memory. I can get the memory. It's Windows 9X. You can do anything you wanted. I can query the memory of the graphics buffer and get the actual color in memory. And I was talking to somebody, and we're whiteboarding it all out, had it all figured out. Then luckily, I had an epiphany, and the epiphany was, it's weird when you have an epiphany where you realize you're stupid. Look, if setPixel isn't working, Windows is going to look really funky. I can, as far as functionality goes, to make sure basics were there, yeah, I could use getPixel to test setPixel, and vice versa. It was all right. But I can think of other examples of trying to automate UI that was really hard. How many of you and UI tends to be the toughest, but if you're a UI automator, how many of you have an experience where you're working, I can't get at that element, but if I go in this back door, I know, I'll create a new framework and I'll put it in, and the ROI on that, the return on investment on automating that little bit, not that exciting. So I made those mistakes. And also you see teams that shun automation. Probably not here. You guys are all good testers and good automators, like, oh, we don't need to automate that. Oh, my first day at Microsoft, because I knew all this visual test, this MS test, I knew how to automate. I thought, oh my God, they hired me to write automation. I'm not that good at it, but I spent the 2 weeks between my last job and Microsoft, like, practicing. Because I didn't want to get fired. I wanted to make sure I did well. And I walked in, and my manager handed me a list of test cases in a spreadsheet, a printed out spreadsheet. And he said, here, you need to run these every day. I said, when do you need them automated by? He looks at me kind of strange. He goes, we don't have time to automate. You need to run these every day. I thought, wow. And I'm not a good rule follower. I had them automated. That was Monday. They were automated by Wednesday. I was finding some while those tests were running, I was finding some really cool bugs by Thursday. So those tests should have been automated. We weren't following the rule. These rules I've learned through years and years of screwing shit up. So I'm happy to give them to you for free. That's my service to you. Okay. Here is a Google login form. Let's not make it too complex. Has a first name, a last name, a username, a password, and a birthday. How do we test that? Yell some stuff out. Help me out. We're done. Ship it. What do you want to do for the name and first name? Try blank. I know. Let's try some Cyrillic characters. I bet you those don't work. What? Digits, numbers. Yeah, can I have numbers in my username? Can I have punctuation? See, you've tried this before, you know the answers. But this is test design. You start thinking about what are the things we can do? How about username? How long can that be? I'm going to pull out the RFC for email addresses and see if they've conformed to all those. They probably have, but I'll imagine this is a company besides Google that has made this. We want to come up with these ideas. Not all of them are good. Do you know where good ideas come from? A couple crummy ideas getting together. Louder. Yes, they do. How about passwords? What do you want to try there? Yeah, see if they'll accept a crummy password. Anybody use passphrases? A sentence with like a space, like me all the time. Won't take spaces in my password. Really angers me. I want to try all those things out. How long can my password be? Can I just put a big lorem ipsum phrase in there? That's test design. Okay, now, which of those, does that lead you towards any automation? No, maybe. When we talked about those ideas, what was the one constant? String changes. Trying different strings in those fields. So maybe we write a data-driven test that just kind of loops through a bunch of stuff. Maybe, I don't know. How about the birthday field? What do we want to try there? Yeah, well, it's probably locked in there, but I want to pick future dates. This is my birthday. Today, the days that don't exist. Find those February 29th that never happened. Yeah, try those dates before, was it January 1st, 1970? All the dates when stuff got messed up. I stopped myself that time. Try those things. And those things are probably just good manual test cases. You can do them once, you're done. Maybe you write the regression test if you're really high on those, but you get some ideas. And what I do when I do test design, this is a little small. It's all right. If you're as old as me, you can't read it from the back. But I'll make a mind map. I'll just dump all my testing ideas into a mind map. You can do this stuff in different ways. I don't really do test design docs anymore, but when I did them at Microsoft, probably my last 5 to 10 years there, I just use mind maps. It's easier to communicate with other people I worked with. We could go through and highlight or circle the test cases, the tests that we would automate versus the ones that we figure would get covered through usage or we wouldn't bother to automate. There's example 1, test design. Let's have a little more fun. Here's an app in action. It's a screenshot. All it does is this. It's going to be used for gambling, let's say. Not sure how yet. You press the roll button. Here, I'm giving you the verbal spec right now. You press the roll button, and it prints out 5 numbers. They're all 0 through 9. Random, and then at the top it totals up the numbers. Are they correct? Good? Shall we ship it? Is it good to go? Does it pass the spec? All right. We don't know. Why not? We haven't played with it yet. So here's like 3 easy functional test cases. I can do the roll button, verify it's correct. We just did this as I was talking through it. Yeah, all right. Now we're good. We passed all the tests. We're green. We know what that means, right? We can ship. No. Why not? Oh, let's look at it. Look what I brought with me. A Windows machine. So, it's a dialogue, can't be resized, we're good. 4, 13, 60, it's good. I just did it again. How's it working? Can we ship now? You want to see if I can close it? It's closed. I'm going to start it again. Okay, remember the requirements? It's going to, every time I press the button, should generate 5 numbers, and they should be added up to the total. Oh, let's look. Let's do it a couple times. We haven't rolled twice in a row yet, have we? All right. Let's get back here. I like the ideas, though. You're doing well. Rolling a couple times. So that's a big number. That looks good. Can I ship it now? I got one yes. Okay, the requirements are to remember the total should be correct. Is it still correct? 16, 18, 20, 24, yep. Should be correct. And what about that third one? It should be random. Do they seem random? Oh, how would we know? We should do math. So if you were given this task, what would you do? That's very good. Unfortunately, I got this from my, we don't have the code. Well, for this scenario, shush. Because I'm trying to make a point, that's why. So what do we want to do? We want to verify it's random and that it's correct. So we want to make sure that, 1, the numbers are 0 through 9. So far, so good. We want to make sure the addition's correct, and we want to make sure that they're random. So I can write some automation that presses roll and adds up the numbers in the text, the bottom, and makes sure they match what's in the top. Good enough? Good. And then for the random part, we'll take a look at it. So how many times should I run this? How many times is it good enough? Let's do 100. 200? Look, I don't know how long you have, but I want to get to that party later. We're not going to run it a million times. Let's do 100 first, see what happens. Great thing about it was too fast. I hate a lot of things about UI automation, but it's still fun to watch, right? Like all good automation, I have a log file. Okay, no addition failures. What do you think about the distribution? Oh, what was that? We need more runs. Why? You can't figure out if anything's random from 100 runs. What should happen? Anybody study statistics? It's the new necessary field for software testing, I think. I'll talk more about that tomorrow. But as we run more and more runs, these numbers should get closer and closer together. All right? That's how random works. So how many times should we run it? 10,000. That's 2 more zeros, right? Okay, I'm going to have to talk for a while while this runs. I can, and actually what I'll do is I'll share both. I already mentioned I'm old, right? So anybody else write in C and C++? All right, well, the code is in C and C++, so it's on GitHub. You can look at it later. So this is going crazy. Yeah, it looks good. I don't see any weird numbers there. That looks fun. What do you think? Now can we ship it? It's for betting. If I can like predict what number is going to come up, I can bet some money on it and win.
Well, for betting, if you use it for your kid's birthday party, that's fine.
Yeah.
If it's going to be,
No, it's a gambling machine. That's probably important to ask.
Okay, then maybe a couple more zeros.
So if you think about if you think about gambling, all you want to do is beat the odds. Right now, I have a 1 in 10 shot at picking any number to show up in any field. But if I can just get it skewed a little bit more in the right direction, then I can be a winner. Who doesn't want to who said 10,000? And why did I listen to you? I'm running in a VM. It should be just about done. Should be just, now's a good time for a drink of water. Here's a note to add a counter to my test program. On my machine at home, it ran 10,000 really fast. I thought this would be a little bit faster. So there are some of the ideas he yelled out, by the way, like test different fonts, or different font sizes or high DPI. Those are great things for a single manual test case. Those aren't things generally, really crazy developers, that will break from build to build. But they're things we need to test. We need to test the localized version for that one string, for the 2 strings in here. All those things need to be tested as well. But yeah, that's a good thing to do too. And those are, oh, come on. Why did I listen to you? Has anybody been counting along in their head? Know how high we are? All right, we'll come back to it in a second. Now, I swear if I Alt-Tab away, if I switch away, there's no secret stuff happening over here. We'll just visit it in a moment. Okay. Basically, there's the meat of the code. It's this brute force automation at its best. And I've no framework involved. I just literally got the handle to the window and send a button down and a button up to the roll button. That's it. And then I scrape out the values. It's just straight. I did a lot of Windows programming this way, a lot of Windows testing this way. I tested a lot of API stuff, but for Windows, for actual window testing, testing applications, I wrote a lot of this kind of stuff. I ended up, you know that story earlier about over-automating, and automating things that shouldn't be automated? Once I was doing that, but I found a bug anyway, because sometimes we're all lucky. I worked on a lot of, for the record, I worked on Xbox One, a very cool and good product I'm proud of, but I also worked on some things like Windows Millennium, not so hot. I worked on this thing, I don't even know what it was called anymore. This code name was Mira. And what it did, the idea was you would have a monitor running Windows CE on your computer, and you could take your monitor with you, and as soon as you undocked it, it would terminal serve into your machine, so you have like your machine walking around your house. It was kind of a dumb idea. But we had, there was a connect button on it, and that was it on the screen. After that, it was terminal server, so there isn't much to test there. But for the heck of it, I wrote a program that would connect and disconnect, and connect and disconnect. And I thought I'd just let it run overnight and see what happened, like one of these memory reliability tests. And I wrote the code, and I got my coat, I looked down, and it crashed. First thing I thought was, oh man, my code's screwed up. I wrote some crummy code. And I look at it, and I tweak a few things. I go, that's okay, I'm an idiot. I'll try it again. So I think I fixed it. And I fixed it. I made some changes, ran it again. I grabbed my stuff, and I went to leave, and I go, it crashed again. Put my stuff down, took my coat off. I go, man, I wish I could write good code. It used to be, and how do you feel that way when you write tests and they fail? You go, is it me or the product? I don't know. Just kind of depends on my mood, how I'm feeling about myself. So I looked at it for a while, but I went home, came back the next morning, actually debugged it all the way. Pretty bad memory leak in the app. Wasn't my fault at all. Felt pretty good, but, you know. There's where the code lives. I'm sure it's done by now, right? Yes. Okay. And holy crap. It's okay, that's expected. Look at that. About 0.2% of the 0.3% of the time, the addition messes up. Who said ship it? Fired. What do you know about the random numbers now, after 10,000 times? They're not random. Why aren't they random? What's wrong? Someone's in love with the number 3. That's what's wrong. Oh, I think I just totaled the first, because I was lazy. I just ended up totaling the first, because it wouldn't fit on the screen if I went all the way over. I just totaled the first, the occurrences of the numbers 1 through 6 instead of 1 through 9, because originally this came up 1 through 6, so. Used to be a dice roller, work in progress. So yeah, it's broken. We couldn't find out until we ran it 10,000 times. Probably would have found it about 5,000 though, right? Maybe a little less. How many of you want to run that test manually 5,000 times? Where's the person who said they like doing the mind-numbingly boring stuff all day? Yeah, automate that stuff. All right, I'll fix that code later. Okay, new question of the day. Do you trust your tests? You know my answer, right? I just talked about it 2 minutes ago. Sometimes. When you run your test pass, or your tests, and they all pass. How do you feel? Weird, yeah. That's the right feeling. How do you feel when there's a failure? So, yeah, I feel kind of bad then too. How many of you write what I'll call trustworthy tests? When you have a test that fails, how often, I should put it, I'll ask differently. When a test fails, how many of you know 100% of the time it's a product bug? Yeah, that's the problem, right? So let me put a earworm in your head, a thought in your head. If you have tests that fail that should be passing, that means you have tests that are passing that should be failing. The logic doesn't totally work, but go with me. If you have tests can be flaky in different ways, right? Have you heard this term, flaky tests? I've heard it in talks today. I went to the Google Test Automation Conference 2014. It's a test automation conference. So everybody talked about test automation. Every single talk mentioned flaky tests. Why do you think that is? Because damn tests are flaky, that's why. So what do we do about flaky tests? We rerun them, yeah. Because if it runs again and it passes, then we're cool. Whew. How many of you do that? Feel pretty good about that? And I will tell you, because I'm all about admitting guilt up here, I have written frameworks that would try running the tests, they run the whole suite, take all the tests that failed and run them all again a couple times. And then the real failures are only the ones that failed every time. What's wrong with that? I thought someone would yell out, well, what's wrong with that is you're stupid, Alan, you're dumb. Which is true, I was. You don't know why they failed or passed. And the other thing you do is like, oh man, I'm not sure why that's passing or failing, so we'll just turn that test off. It's pretty common. Have the flaky test isolation bin. Here's the tests we can't trust because they fail sometimes, they pass sometimes. We're going to put them over in their own bin for now. And we write really technical, cool, gnarly, low-level, awesome code to make this stuff happen, to make our automation green, to do something sensible with those flaky tests. I've written a ton of this. I'm sure at least a few of you have done the same. I've learned to care a lot about those tests that fail and then pass, because I know there's something weird going on there. I also know enough to not turn off the flaky tests, because often those flaky tests find some really good bugs when they're not being flaky. Sometimes the flaky test is the flaky product code, but that's a good thing too. I think what I've noticed, at least where I've hung out, is a lot of tolerance for flaky tests. And by doing some of these things I just described, by rerunning them, by quarantining them, by only allowing the approved tests to run more often. Going back to the pyramid, anecdotally, my experience, most of those flaky tests live higher up the stack. Make tests simple. You guys all familiar with the term code smells? Test code has smells too, right? What are some test code smells? Lots of branching. In fact, tests really shouldn't have any logic in them. Setup maybe, but that's about it. How many of you write Selenium? Or one of its flavors? How many of you put sleeps in your code? Liars. There's more of you. And what happens is like, I should use a wait object here, but I'm busy. That's a lot more code. So the oracle in testing is the part that determines whether the test passed or failed. This is the whole problem with getPixel and setPixel. I have watched people, including me, basically rewrite a component to try and write a good oracle. Eventually just give up. Can't be tested. One of the things that's helped me out in Flaky Tests is measuring a thing called mean time to diagnose. How long does it take you from the moment you see a failure to figuring out what the failure was? What actually failed? What has to be fixed? Anybody ever done that? Would you be embarrassed if you did it? That number should be small, like in minutes. And I say that knowing I've spent hours, and when you're running 1 million tests and you have 1,000 failures to go diagnose. Oh, I'm reminded of, I worked in Office for a little while. No groans, huh? And we had a system. We wrote tools to go, what did we call it? Shoot. Wasn't part of the talk. I didn't put a bullet point in here. But we tried to classify, like go through and look at all the errors and figure out which ones were the same or could be the same to try and bucket the errors and figure out, like, were these two tests failing for the same reason? Really, we just needed to write better tests. That was definitely the most wide, huge scoop ice cream cone ever. Office used to have a coding milestone, 6 months, then stabilization for about 12. I knew a guy that once he had to write, I'll anonymize to protect him, he had to write a function to return the size of a font in some particular, in pixels at a certain thing. And he had to get it done before code complete, so he just wrote float font, font height, shit, I want to go home, return 12. Somebody call it enter chicken. It's like, this doesn't work, it's busted. Yeah, I'll fix it during stabilization. You got to go through pain to learn how to do things in a more fun way. So I think debugging and logging is incredibly important in your test code. What happens when your test fails? What do you do? Anybody? After you rerun it, how many of you loaded up in the debugger to try and see what went wrong? A lot of you. I've learned I love debugging. I wrote the debugger for Windows Millennium. Yeah, I know. But you could debug that piece of junk pretty well. I love debugging. It's one of the most fun activities I do in software. If you have to open the debugger to figure out why your test failed, you're losing. Your logs should tell you what went wrong. If your logs don't tell you what went wrong, open the debugger, figure out what went wrong, fix your logs. If you think that's too hard for test code, the SQL team at Microsoft did that for product code. They would get crashes from the wild, and if they had to load up a debugger to figure out what went wrong, they then had to go add product logging to go fix it so it could debug better in the future. So if they can do it for SQL engine, we can all do it for test code. Your logs have to tell what went wrong. We have to be able to debug these things faster. So automation, I think it's overused, gasp, at an test automation conference, but also undervalued. It definitely augments human testing. I look at automation as a way for me to not be bored. My internal heuristic is one I can never teach because it's just me, is I automate when I'm bored. It's the reason on my first day at Microsoft, I got that, I'm going to get really bored running these test cases off of this spreadsheet. I'm going to automate them. I wrote some wicked, awful, disgusting, huge, easy to read batch files to automate a lot of the Xbox One infrastructure and testing. Because I would have been bored doing it the otherwise. Type this command, then type this command. Crack open this thing, put this in there. And also automation is valuable when we're trying to get rid of human error, the places where we can make mistakes. Think about those. You should develop your own heuristics for what to automate and don't over-automate. And then the last thing to reiterate is stop separating automation design from test design. It's all just the same. Those are my main points. I have a blog, I have a podcast, and I have a free ebook you can check out. And thank you. I think now comes the point where you don't have to yell out your questions. You can actually have a microphone.
Yeah. У кого есть вопрос? Вижу.
Hi. The question is, do you really think that machine learning is not going to kill a huge part of manual testing?
Actually, manual, no. I think machine learning is going to kill, actually, the wrong place to say it, but you asked. I think machine learning is going to kill off a lot of test automation.
Okay.
Not manual testing.
And the second question is this testing ice cream, however you call it. I think it should look like hourglass, because at the bottom of this there are real customers and people who find actual bugs after us. And probably they find, like a lot of bugs after all of us.
I think that I see what you're saying. And I use customer data a lot to find bugs and usage patterns, bugs they haven't even reported as bugs via customer data. I think that I actually want to find more of that. Okay, I can see an hourglass. I'm visualizing it now. So you have for everyone else, because I just got it, you have the unit tests at the bottom, integration, middle level tests, end-to-end UI tests, and then tests you find from monitoring user data. Did I get that right? Yeah. We're a team. You're on Team Allen.
More questions?
Front row.
What was that about the dice roller? It really sounded like a made-up bug. And one question: can you share what was the actual code and how did that? Was it completely?
Yeah, it was a contrived bug. It was an on-purpose manipulation of the output, but only in the real world. These obscure random things happen because the data center in Eastern Europe went down and it rolled over to Western Europe, and there was a time zone change at the same time, and it caused this thing to happen that would only happen 0.02% of the time. I didn't have time to simulate that, so I just hard-coded it and said 0.02% of the time, give me a 3 when it was supposed to be something else.
And would you then, with an example of you running this 10,000 times, would you then agree that that would have been the right place to say, we should not do that through the UI, but do it on a lower level?
Yeah, it's a contrived example to get some test design ideas out, ideas on what we would automate versus what we wouldn't automate. But yeah, if you look at the code, it's really that stupid. I wanted to simulate because this happens, right? I wanted to simulate the situation where things happen just because we can't, these these black swans, these things that should never ever happen, but they do because A and B and C and D and E all aligned in a weird way. But I didn't have time to write that application, so I wrote a dumb one instead.
Hello, Alan. I find that you had in presentation a tree of testing, and you didn't mention how much of it you should automate, because I don't really get it. So you should automate all of it, or you should...
No, from
none?
that, so to be clear on that, with the mind map I made, I thought I dumped out what are all the things I would do to test just those 4 fields. And then I would look at that and either with a pen and paper or with the mind mapping tool, sort of circle, yeah, we're going to want to automate that and that and that and that, and that's it. So that's just my starting point. But the main point there is I want to think, when I think about test design, I don't think, let me write my manual tests, then let me write my automated tests. I just want to figure out how am I going to test this, and from there, figure out what to automate.